What is up, Apiary.org? It is Matt Freed back yet again. You thought I was in retirement? Don't call it a comeback. And sitting right next to me is a legend of the alternative comedy scene. She started here in New York City. She's doing her thing out in LA. Very possibly one of the greatest, next to the great ones, like another comedy icon whose name is currently escaping me. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Miss Beth Lapides. Beth, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
So, Beth, for our viewers out there, you are the creator.
Hi, viewers out there.
You are the creator of Un-Cabaret
Yes.
and the Other Network, which are huge successes out in LA right now. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the Un-Cabaret is all about?
The Un-Cabaret was about ongoing storytelling, the ongoing story of your life, which a lot of times would come down to confession, but sometimes it was rants, and sometimes it was very just point of view on what was going on in the world, the moment of now, the story of the world and the story of your life intersecting. And when we started doing it, no one was really doing that kind of thing, and our thing was make sure you're in your now and you're not doing an act. If you have an act, some people we worked with did, like Dana Gould and Patton Oswalt and Greg Behrendt, and some people didn't, like Julia Sweeney, Griffin. You know, people were coming from different places.
Talk a little bit about the Other Network as well.
Well, it started with our pilot. We did a pilot for MTV of a talk show, in fact, and we had heard very positive things. The network loved it. We'd run into people and say, "Oh, we heard such great things about your show. It was announced in Variety," and then we stopped hearing anything. And that was when we formulated the primary axiom of Hollywood math: the absence of yes over time equals no. What would happen is we had sort of a big group, 24, 36, people who would rotate in and around the Un-Cabaret, and people would let us know when they were available, and they go, "Oh, I'm not going to be available for a couple months because I'm doing my pilot. How's it going? I'm really excited. We hear great things." And then they would come back, 2 months later, tail between their legs, like, "It didn't go." So anyway, after ours didn't go, I was like, the man can't tell us about our pilot. And anyway, we should just, I said to Greg one day, we should show our pilot and these other pilots and just go to the club and just show them. And then I went to yoga and I came home and Greg was like, "Well, I've booked the show." I'm like, "What show?" He was like, "That show, The Other Network, we just discussed." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so we just started showing, and people were giving us their pilots. They were literally covered in dust. They'd been in the closet, covered in shame. And we started just showing them in clubs. And what we were always very interested in process and letting the scenes show. And so people would show them, but they would also talk about the process of making TV and making a pilot and what it takes to be great and why it didn't go and the story of making it. So it sort of was two stories. It was both the story that was in the pilot and then the story of the making of the thing. So it was this double layer, and we would show them in nightclubs.
Talk about the show that you're working on. The show is called 100% Happy, 88% of the time, running at the Triad Theater. Talk a little bit about it.
Well, I love that you call it the triad and not the triad, because it takes the trying out of it and puts the tree in. It's much more arboristic.
I got kicked out of private school, so I like to think I learned something in my time there.
I've been working on the show. I've been developing it for a couple of years, and I have not rushed it out of the gate. I had been doing the Uncab, and I was doing new material every show. So at a certain point, and the material always had to be about the now. At a certain point, I started to think the now of now. I want to talk about the big now, and I want to start to put these things together. I had lived a pretty big story of being evicted from our place in LA. Nothing bad. There was no unpaid rent. Please don't worry. It was just a new landlord moving his family in and, relatives and blah, blah, blah. It came at a particularly sort of icky phase in my life anyway, and I decided I didn't want it to just be fine. I wanted to have it be sort of, people kept saying, "Oh, I was evicted and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me." It's like, really? And I just sort of became, I wanted it to be not fine. I didn't want it to work out fine. I wanted it to work out, for me, the best thing that ever happened. And at the same time, I sort of started to realize that we're all being evicted from a paradigm right now. I mean, what's happening in the world with, we're so many people being evicted from their actual homes, but from jobs and lifestyles and expectations about the future and what we think about the future. And I started to realize that we're all being evicted into a crazy new future, which could be amazing. It could be like the best thing that ever happened to us if we get into a sort of sense of conscious evolvement. It's a big take on how my life fits into the big picture and how your life fits into the big picture and how we're all sort of living this evolvement of having been evicted altogether.
Your career has taken a very interesting path. It's led you down a very different path than a lot of comedians, I think, expect to go into these days. And I think with more and more young people who get into comedy because they have a very set path they want to go down. I want to be the next Apatow. Right. I want to be the next Tina Fey. What would your advice be to them if suddenly it's like they're not necessarily following that path, but there is something that's there for them?
So, you have to kind of know in your heart, like start knowing what your real skills are and what you're good at. And, people have to understand that they have a unique set of abilities. And so part of it for people is understanding their unique set of abilities. And if they're going to be the problem sometimes is not, I'm going to be the next Apatow, but saying I'm going to be the next Apatow when really you should be saying I'm going to be the next, Joan Rivers.
The name of the show is 100% Happy, 88% of the time. So the Triad Theater this week in New York City. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out. Beth, thank you so much. Thank you.